Chapter 1. The Cellar Door. The iron bolt scraped against rusted metal, and Alara's world went black. Stay down there where you belong, Omega filth. The voice belonged to Mira, the beta female who'd made Alara's life hell since the moment she'd arrived at the Shadowpine Pack compound 3 months ago. The cellar door slammed shut with a finality that made Alara's chest constrict. Darkness swallowed her whole, thick and suffocating as the musty air that filled her lungs. She pressed her palm against the swell of her belly, barely showing yet, but undeniable. 20 weeks. Twins. The pack healer had confirmed it 2 days ago, her eyes widening with something that looked like fear before she'd sworn Alara to secrecy. "Keep them hidden," the old woman had whispered. "If anyone discovers who fathered those children, you won't live to see them born." Alara's fingers trembled as they traced the curve of her stomach. She was human, fragile, powerless, an outsider who'd stumbled into a world she'd never been meant to see. The wolves tolerated her presence only because she worked in the pack's communal kitchen, kept her head down, and asked no questions. But she'd broken the cardinal rule. She'd caught the attention of someone far above her station. The memory flickered through her mind like lightning, 6 months ago, at the Convergence, that massive gathering of packs from across the Northern Territories. She'd been serving wine to the visiting dignitaries when their eyes met across the Great Hall. Silver gray, like moonlight on steel. The most beautiful and terrifying eyes she'd ever seen. She hadn't known who he was. Not then. He'd found her later, in the gardens, and for 3 impossible nights, Alara had felt alive in a way she'd never experienced. He'd touched her like she was precious, spoken to her like her thoughts mattered, made love to her with a reverence that shattered every wall she'd built around her heart since her parents' deaths. Then he'd vanished, and she'd learned the truth. Cale Thorn, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, the most powerful shifter in 500 miles, and completely, devastatingly out of her reach. She'd been a fool, a naive human girl who'd believed, for just a moment, that the supernatural world might have room for her. Now she was paying the price. Footsteps creaked above her head. Multiple sets. Alara pressed herself against the cold stone wall, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Don't care what excuses she makes." Mira's voice carried through the floorboards. "She's been stealing food. I saw her myself sneaking extra portions. She's human. They're always hungry." That was Garrett, the pack's enforcer. His tone was bored, uninterested. "She's getting fat," Mira hissed. "Have you looked at her lately? Something's wrong with her." Alara's breath caught. She wrapped both arms around her middle, as if she could somehow make herself smaller, less visible. "So, throw her out." Garrett again. "Why do we need another useless mouth to feed?" "Because Alpha Donovan said..." "Alpha Donovan isn't here." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Donovan, the Shadowpine Alpha, had been called away to the Eastern Territories 2 weeks ago. Some kind of emergency council. He was the only thing standing between Alara and the pack members who viewed her as less than nothing. Without him, she was completely vulnerable. "Fine," Mira said, and Alara could hear the vicious smile in her voice. "Let her rot down there for a few days. Maybe she'll learn her place. If she survives..." The front door slammed open with enough force to rattle the entire building. Alara froze. The temperature in the room above seemed to drop. She felt it even through the floorboards, a presence so commanding, so utterly dominant, that it made her wolf shifter captors go completely silent. "What?" said a voice that turned Alara's blood to ice. "Is happening here?" She knew that voice, would know it anywhere, even after 6 months. even through layers of wood and stone. Kyle. Alpha King! Mira's voice had gone from cruel to syrupy sweet in an instant. We didn't expect, we had no word of your arrival. I don't announce my movements to subordinate packs. Cold. Utterly devoid of emotion. Nothing like the warm, gentle man who'd held Alara in the moonlight and promised he'd never forget her. I asked you a question. Nothing, Your Majesty. Just dealing with a discipline issue. A human servant who's been causing problems. Silence stretched. Alara pressed her hand over her mouth, hardly daring to breathe. A human? Something shifted in Kale's tone. Where is this human now? In the cellar. But truly, it's nothing that requires your attention. Open it. Your Majesty? The cellar door. Open. It. Now. Alara heard Mira's sharp intake of breath, then rapid footsteps. The bolt scraped again, and light flooded down the narrow stairs. She squinted against the sudden brightness, her heart threatening to pound straight through her chest. A figure appeared at the top of the stairs, silhouetted against the light. Even without seeing his face, she knew him. The breadth of his shoulders. The way he held himself, like the world would bend before he ever would. Come up, Kale said softly. His voice wrapped around her like a physical touch, and against every instinct of self-preservation, Alara found herself climbing the stairs. Her legs shook. Her vision swam, but she moved toward him like a moth to flame, helpless against the pull. When she reached the top step, she finally saw his face. He looked exactly as she remembered. Sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, that silver-gray gaze that seemed to see straight through her. But there were new lines around his eyes, a hardness that hadn't been there before. His eyes met hers, and something flickered in their depths. Shock. Recognition. And beneath it all, something that looked almost like pain. Then his gaze dropped to her belly. To the small but unmistakable swell beneath her thin dress. Every wolf in the room went utterly still. Kyle's expression didn't change, but Alara felt the air itself shift around him, like reality bending under the weight of his barely leashed power. Alara, he said quietly, and hearing her name from his lips after 6 months of silence nearly broke her. Behind him, Mira made a small, strangled sound. Your Majesty, she gasped. You know this human? Kale didn't look away from Alara. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Everyone out, he said. Now. Chapter 2. Silver-gray eyes in the darkness. The room emptied in seconds. Mira practically fled, her face pale with terror. Garrett followed without a word, and within moments, Alara stood alone with the Alpha King in the suddenly too small room. The silence pressed against her eardrums like water pressure at the bottom of a deep lake. Kale hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. He simply stared at her with those devastating silver eyes, and Alara felt herself unraveling under the weight of his gaze. You left, she said finally, because someone had to break the silence, and it clearly wasn't going to be him. Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. You didn't even say goodbye. Something flickered across his face, too quick to read, too complex to name. I had responsibilities. Responsibilities. She laughed, a broken sound that hurt her throat. Is that what I was? An irresponsible mistake? Don't. The word cracked like a whip, and power rolled off him in waves. Not threatening, not quite, but enough to remind her exactly how vast the gap was between them. He closed his eyes, visibly wrestling for control. When he opened them again, his voice had gentled. Don't put words in my mouth, Alara. Hearing her name again, spoken with that particular combination of roughness and tenderness that she'd convinced herself she'd imagined, made her knees weak. She grabbed the back of a nearby chair to steady herself. His gaze tracked the movement, then dropped again to her belly. His jaw worked. "How long have you been here?" he asked quietly. 3 months. After you left, I had nowhere else to go. Your beta, Marcus, he arranged for me to work in the kitchens at Shadowpine. Said it would be temporary until I could find something more permanent." She swallowed hard. "I didn't know you'd sent him. Not until later." Cale's expression hardened. Marcus exceeded his authority. He was being kind. He was putting you in danger. He moved then, finally, crossing the space between them in 3 long strides. Up close, he was even more overwhelming than she remembered, tall enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, built like violence barely contained in human form. Shadowpine is not a safe pack for humans. Donovan tolerates them, but barely. His wolves... He bit off the words, his hands curling into fists at his sides. Alara watched those hands, remembered how they'd felt on her skin. Gentle, despite their obvious capacity for destruction. "They've been fine," she lied. "Mostly." His eyes narrowed. "The cellar tells a different story. I can handle..." "Don't." He stepped closer, so close she could feel the heat radiating off him, could smell the scent that had haunted her dreams for 6 months, pine and smoke and something wild that had no name. "Don't lie to me, Alara. Not about this." Her breath hitched. "What do you want me to say? That it's been hell? That I've spent 3 months terrified, alone, working myself to exhaustion while your wolves treat me like garbage?" Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Would that make you feel better, Your Majesty?" He flinched. Actually flinched, like she'd struck him. "My name is Cale," he said roughly. "You've screamed it in my arms. You don't get to Your Majesty me now." The memory slammed into her, his name on her lips in the darkness, his body moving against hers, the way he'd looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Heat flooded her cheeks. "That was before I knew who you were. I'm the same man. Are you?" She forced herself to hold his gaze. "Because the man I knew wouldn't have left without a word. Wouldn't have let me think..." Her voice cracked, and she hated herself for the weakness. "Think what?" He reached for her, then seemed to catch himself, his hand falling back to his side. Frustration radiated from him in waves. "Alara, what did you think?" That it meant something. That maybe, impossibly, she'd found someone who saw past her humanity to something worth keeping. That the connection between them had been real. But she couldn't say any of that. Not to the Alpha King, who'd probably bedded 100 women and forgotten them just as quickly. Instead, she looked down at her stomach. At the secret she'd been carrying alone for 5 months. Kyle followed her gaze. When he spoke again, his voice had gone very quiet. "Is it mine?" The question hung between them like a blade. Alara's laugh was bitter. "No, I made a habit of sleeping with strange men at political gatherings. There were so many, I can't quite remember." "Alara." The warning in his voice made her snap her mouth shut. She watched emotions war across his face. Hope and fear and something that looked almost like wonder, all tangled together with a healthy dose of barely restrained violence. "Yes," she said finally, because he deserved the truth. "They're yours." "They?" The word came out strangled. "Twins." She placed both hands on her belly, protective. The healer confirmed it. 2 heartbeats. Cale went utterly still. For a long moment he simply stared at her, and Alara couldn't begin to read the expression on his face. Then slowly, he dropped to his knees in front of her. The Alpha King of the Northern Territories, the most powerful shifter in the region, knelt before a human servant in a borrowed dress. "May I?" His hand hovered near her stomach, and the vulnerability in his voice nearly undid her. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. His palm settled over the swell of her belly, large and warm and impossibly gentle. The touch sent electricity racing through her entire body. His eyes drifted closed, and she watched his face transform, the hardness melting into something raw and unguarded. "I can feel them," he whispered. "Their heartbeats, so fast, so strong." His other hand came up to join the first, cradling her stomach like she carried something infinitely precious. "Gods, Alara, why didn't you tell me?" "How?" The word came out harsh. "You left no way to contact you. No forwarding address, no message, nothing. Just gone. Like I'd never existed." His eyes opened, meeting hers, and the pain she saw there stole her breath. "I thought I was protecting you," he said hoarsely. "From my world. From the danger that comes with being connected to me." His hands tightened fractionally on her stomach. "I was wrong." Chapter 3. Scars Beneath the Surface. Alara's hand moved of its own accord, settling over his where it rested on her belly. His skin was hot beneath her fingers, almost feverish, and she felt the tremor that ran through him at her touch. "You don't get to decide what's best for me," she said quietly. "Not without asking." Kale's gaze lifted to hers, and the intensity there made her breath catch. "You're right." He rose slowly, reluctantly removing his hands from her stomach, though his eyes never left her face. "But if I had asked, would you have said yes? Would you have chosen this life, knowing what it means to be bound to someone like me?" "I don't even know what it means." Frustration bled into her voice. "You gave me 3 nights, Kale. 3 perfect, impossible nights where I felt like I mattered. Then you disappeared, and I've spent 6 months trying to understand what any of it meant. It meant everything." The words came out fierce, almost angry. He paced away from her, running a hand through his dark hair. "That's the problem. It wasn't supposed to happen. I came to the Convergence to negotiate treaties, to maintain peace between the packs, not to—" He broke off, his shoulders rigid with tension. "Not to what? Slum with a human?" The old hurt rose up, bitter and familiar. He spun back to face her. "Not to find my mate." The words fell between them like stones in still water, sending ripples through everything Alara thought she understood. "Your what?" Kale's laugh was harsh. "You don't even know, do you? What we are. What you did to me." He moved back toward her, each step deliberate, predatory. Not threatening, she'd never felt threatened by him, but reminding her that beneath the human veneer, he was something other, something wild. Wolves mate for life, Alara. When we find the one person whose soul calls to ours, there's no mistaking it, no denying it. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "That's not possible. I'm human. I can't be, and yet you are." He stopped inches from her, so close she could see flecks of darker gray in his eyes. "The moment I saw you across that hall, I knew. Every instinct I have screamed at me that you were mine, that I'd found what I'd stopped believing existed. Then why did you leave?" The question came out broken, and she hated how desperate she sounded. Pain carved deep lines into his face. "Because I'm the Alpha King. Because my world is dangerous and political and full of wolves who would kill you just to hurt me. Because—" His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Because I've lost everyone I've ever loved, and I couldn't bear the thought of watching you die too." The confession hung raw between them. Alara's chest tightened with understanding, with a pain that echoed his own. "My parents," she said softly, "died when I was 17. Car accident on a mountain road. I was supposed to be with them, but I'd stayed home because of a stupid fight about college applications." She wrapped her arms around herself, the old guilt rising like bile. "I spent 5 years thinking I was being punished for surviving, that I didn't deserve to be happy, because they weren't here to be happy with me. Kale's expression shifted, softening. Then I met you, she continued, forcing herself to meet his eyes. And for 3 nights, I forgot about guilt, forgot about being alone. You made me feel like maybe surviving wasn't a punishment after all. Her voice cracked. So when you left, it wasn't just losing you. It was losing proof that I deserved to exist. Alara? He reached for her, but she stepped back. No. You don't get to comfort me when you're the one who hurt me. Tears finally spilled over, hot against her cheeks. You were protecting yourself, Kale. Not me. You were too scared to risk your heart, so you made the decision for both of us. The truth of her words seemed to hit him like a physical blow. He stood there, the most powerful shifter in the territory, looking suddenly lost. You're right, he said finally. I was a coward. He moved to the window, staring out at the darkening forest beyond. I watched my parents die in a pack war when I was 15. Watched my sister get torn apart by a rival Alpha's enforcers when I was 20. I became king because everyone I loved was dead, and I was all that was left. His hands gripped the windowsill hard enough that the wood groaned. I told myself I'd never care about anyone again. That being alone was safer than risking that kind of loss. Alara's anger wavered, replaced by something more complex. So what changed? You. He turned back to face her. Standing there in that cellar doorway, pregnant with my children, looking at me like I'm both your salvation and your worst mistake. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I realized I'd already lost you by trying not to lose you. And that's a special kind of stupidity, even for me. Despite everything, Alara felt her own lips twitch. Are you apologizing? I'm trying to. He took a careful step toward her. I'm told I'm not very good at it. Part of the whole raised to be an alpha king thing. We don't apologize often. Try harder. But her voice had lost its edge. He closed the distance between them, slowly, giving her time to retreat if she wanted to. When she didn't, he reached up and gently brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. I'm sorry, Alara, for leaving, for making you think you didn't matter, for letting you believe, even for a second, that what we shared was anything less than world-shattering. His hand moved to cup her face, and she found herself leaning into the touch despite every self-protective instinct screaming at her to pull away. I can't promise you safety. My world is dangerous, and there are wolves who will see you, and our children, as weaknesses to exploit. But I can promise you this. I will spend every day for the rest of my life proving that you're worth fighting for. Chapter 4. The Mark of Kings. Alara wanted to resist, wanted to hold on to her anger like armor, because anger was safer than hope. Hope had already broken her once, but standing there with Kale's hand warm against her cheek, his silver eyes full of something that looked dangerously like devotion, she felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. I don't know your world. I don't understand pack politics or mating bonds or any of it. All I know is that I'm terrified, and I've been alone for so long, and these babies... Her hand moved to her stomach. They deserve better than a mother who's barely surviving. Kyle's other hand came up to frame her face, tilting her head back so she had no choice but to meet his gaze. You are surviving. Against impossible odds, in a hostile pack, carrying the children of a man who abandoned you. And you're still standing. Still fighting. His thumb traced the curve of her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. That's not weakness, Alara. That's strength I've rarely seen in wolves 3 times your size. Pretty words from an alpha king. Truth from a man who's watched you grow life inside you while his own kind tried to break you. His voice dropped, rough with emotion. You're not alone anymore. I won't let you be. She wanted to believe him. Gods, how she wanted to believe him. What happens now? She asked. Do you just take me away from here? Add me to your collection of... She bit off the words, but Kale's expression darkened anyway. My collection? The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Is that what you think? That there are others? Alara pulled back from his touch, wrapping her arms around herself. You're the Alpha King. You're telling me in 6 months you haven't... No. The word came out flat, absolute. There's been no one. Not since you. Not before you. Not for nearly 2 years before that night. He moved closer again, invading her space with the kind of confidence that should have been arrogant but somehow wasn't. The mating bond doesn't work that way. Once a wolf finds their true mate, everyone else becomes... noise. Irrelevant. My body doesn't even respond to anyone else anymore. Heat crept up Alara's neck at the implication. You're saying you can't... I'm saying I don't want to. There's a difference. His gaze held hers, unflinching. You've ruined me for anyone else, little human. Whether you meant to or not. The endearment shouldn't have warmed her. Shouldn't have made her pulse quicken. But it did, and she saw the exact moment Kale noticed. Saw his nostrils flare slightly as he scented the change in her. Your heart just skipped, he said quietly, almost wonderingly. You still feel it. The pull between us. That doesn't mean I trust it. But even as she spoke, she was leaning toward him, drawn by something she couldn't name or control. Then don't trust it. Trust me. He reached for her hand, moving slowly enough that she could pull away. When she didn't, his fingers intertwined with hers, his palm rough with calluses against her softer skin. Let me show you something. Before she could ask what, he guided her hand to his chest, pressing it flat against his heart. The beat beneath her palm was strong, steady, but faster than she'd expected. Racing, actually, like he'd been running. Feel that? He asked. That's what you do to me. Just standing here, not even touching you the way I want to, and my heart threatens to beat out of my chest. Alara swallowed hard. Kale. I'm not finished. He moved her hand slightly, sliding it beneath the collar of his shirt to rest against bare skin. The contact sent electricity arcing through her entire body, and she felt him shudder in response. Here, do you feel it? She did. Beneath her fingertips, raised and rough, scar tissue. A lot of it, carved into his skin in what felt like deliberate patterns. What is that? His jaw tightened. The mark of my father's pack. Every Alpha King bears them, symbols cut into flesh with silver blades on the day of their coronation. A reminder that leadership is pain, and pain is what makes us strong. His voice had gone distant, detached. I was 15. They took 6 hours to complete the ritual. Alara's breath caught. She traced the scars gently, feeling the story written in his skin. That's barbaric. That's tradition. But she heard the bitterness beneath the words. The old ways die hard in wolf culture. Blood and pain and dominance. That's the language everyone speaks. Softness is weakness. Caring is vulnerability. And yet you came back for me. His eyes snapped to hers, suddenly fierce. You're not weakness. You're... He seemed to struggle for words, his free hand clenching and unclenching at his side. When I left you, I thought I was being strong. Thought I was choosing duty over desire, protecting you from the danger of being near me. But I was dying inside, Alara. Every day without... You felt like bleeding out slowly. And when Marcus reported that you were here, pregnant and alone, his voice broke. I've never moved faster in my life. Marcus told you. 2 days ago. I would have come sooner, but I was 300 miles away negotiating with the Eastern Territories. I drove through the night, didn't stop, didn't sleep. He brought his other hand up to rest on her stomach again, the gesture becoming familiar, almost possessive. I couldn't stop thinking about you carrying my children alone, about what that must have felt like. Alara felt something crack inside her chest. It felt like drowning, she admitted quietly. Like the world had gotten too big and too small at the same time. I know that feeling. His thumb traced circles on her belly, so gentle she might have imagined it. I've been drowning for 6 months. They stood there in the failing light, connected by touch and truth, and the lives growing between them. Outside, she could hear wolves moving through the compound, whispers and footsteps, the pack reacting to their alpha king's unexpected presence. Chapter 5. Promises Written in Blood. They're talking about us, Alara said softly, acutely aware of the whispers bleeding through the walls. The pack. They know now. Kael's expression hardened. Let them talk. You don't understand. Mira, the others, they already hated me for being human. Now that they know I'm carrying your children... Fear tightened around her throat. I won't be safe here. Not anymore. You were never safe here. His voice carried an edge that made her shiver. Which is why you're leaving. Tonight. Leaving? The word came out sharper than she intended. To go where? With me. To Northmoor Keep. My territory. My pack. His hands remained on her, one cradling her face, the other protective over her stomach. Where I can keep you safe. Where my wolves will protect you with their lives. Because you're mine, and anyone who touches what's mine answers to me. The possessiveness in his tone should have rankled, should have made her want to argue, to assert her independence. But instead, it sent heat pooling low in her belly, a primal part of her responding to the promise of protection she'd been desperately craving. Just like that? She asked. You show up, snap your fingers, and I'm supposed to uproot my entire life? What life? The question was gentle but direct. Be honest with me, Alara. What do you have here besides fear and exhaustion? Nothing. The answer rose immediately, and she hated how true it was. She had a cot in a shared servants' quarters, a job that barely kept her fed, and the constant terror that someone would discover her secret. Now the secret was out. I have my independence, she said, but the words felt hollow even to her own ears. Kyle's smile was sad, understanding. Independence isn't the same as safety. And our children... His hand pressed more firmly against her belly, reverent. They deserve to be born. Somewhere they're celebrated, not hidden like a shameful secret. Alara closed her eyes against the sting of tears. I wanted to tell you. When I first found out, I imagined finding you somehow, seeing your face when I shared the news. But then weeks turned into months, and I convinced myself you wouldn't want to know. That you'd see them as a burden, a complication you didn't need. Look at me. His voice carried unmistakable command, the alpha bleeding through. When she opened her eyes, his face was inches from hers, silver eyes blazing. These children are not a burden. They're a miracle I never thought I'd have. Do you understand? Male wolves of royal bloodlines rarely father children. The power in our blood makes conception difficult, sometimes impossible. The fact that you carry two... He broke off, emotion thickening his voice. To what? Alara pressed, sensing there was more he wasn't saying. Kael's jaw worked. Twins born to an alpha king are prophesied. Old magic, older than the packs themselves. It's said they bring either salvation or destruction, balance or chaos. My advisors will lose their minds when they find out. Ice slid down Alara's spine. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's a complicated thing. He brushed a strand of hair back from her face, the gesture achingly tender. But it means our children will be important, powerful, which also means they'll be targets for anyone who wants to destabilize my rule or claim power for themselves. So I was right to be afraid. You were right to be cautious. But fear and caution with me standing beside you is different than fear and caution alone. His forehead touched hers, and she felt him breathe her in. I can't promise you a simple life. I can't promise you safety from every threat. But I can promise you I will burn down anyone who tries to hurt you or our children. I will tear apart any wolf who even looks at you wrong. And I will spend every moment proving that you and these babies are the most important things in my world. The vehemence in his words stole her breath. This wasn't just affection or obligation talking. This was something rawer, more primal. The mating bond he'd mentioned, perhaps, or something deeper that she didn't yet have words for. I'm still angry with you, she said quietly, for leaving. For making me think I didn't matter. I know. His thumb traced her lower lip, and she felt her breath hitch. Be angry. Stay angry as long as you need to. Just be angry where I can keep you safe. That's not exactly a romantic declaration. I'm not a romantic man, Alara. I'm a weapon shaped like one, forged in violence and loss and duty. His eyes held hers, unflinching in their honesty. But for you, I'm willing to learn, to try to be softer, gentler. Everything my upbringing tried to beat out of me. Something in her chest cracked open at that admission. I don't need you to be soft. I just need you to be honest. Then here's honesty. I'm terrified. The confession came out rough, reluctant. Terrified of failing you, of failing them. His hand pressed against her stomach. I've been trained to lead armies, to make strategic decisions that affect thousands. But being a father, being a mate, I have no idea what I'm doing. Alara found herself smiling despite everything. Welcome to my world. I've spent 5 months convinced I'm going to mess this up spectacularly. Then we'll mess it up together. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes fully. Come with me. Not because I'm commanding you as an alpha, but because I'm asking you as the man who's been incomplete since the moment I walked away from you. The please was implicit in his tone, though she suspected the word didn't come easily to him. How many people had ever heard the Alpha King beg for anything? Outside, footsteps approached. Kale's head snapped toward the door, his entire posture shifting into something predatory and alert. A low growl rumbled in his chest, not threatening, but warning. The door opened without preamble, and a tall man with auburn hair and amber eyes stepped inside. He wore the marks of a beta, second in command, and his expression was carefully neutral as his gaze swept over the scene. My king, he said, bowing his head slightly. Alpha Donovan has returned. He's requesting an audience. Kale's arm moved to wrap around Alara's waist, pulling her against his side in a gesture that was unmistakably possessive. Tell him he can wait. Chapter 6. When alphas collide. The beta's eyebrows rose fractionally. With respect, my king, Alpha Donovan was quite insistent. He's heard about the situation with the human, and the human has a name. Kale's voice dropped to something dangerous, and Alara felt the vibration of barely contained violence in the arm wrapped around her. Use it, Marcus. So this was Marcus, the beta who'd arranged her placement at Shadowpine. The man looked between them, something like relief crossing his features before he schooled his expression back to neutrality. Forgive me. Alpha Donovan has heard about Ilara's circumstances. He's concerned about pack protocol and I don't give a damn about his protocols. Kale's grip on Alara tightened protectively. She's leaving with me within the hour. If Donovan has a problem with that, he can take it up with me directly. He's waiting in the main hall, my king. With his inner circle. Marcus's tone carried a warning. Mira has been talking. The whole pack knows about the pregnancy now. and there are questions about bloodlines and legitimacy. Alara's stomach dropped. She'd heard enough whispered conversations in the kitchens to know how important bloodlines were to shifter politics. A human woman carrying the Alpha King's children would be scandalous enough. But twins? The prophesied twins Kale had mentioned? This was about to become a political nightmare. Let them question, Kale said coldly. My children are legitimate by virtue of being mine. Anyone who suggests otherwise will find themselves short a tongue. Kyle, Alara said quietly, placing her hand on his chest. She felt the rapid hammer of his heart, the tension coiled in every muscle. Maybe we should talk to him. If this is his territory, his pack, you're under my protection now. That supersedes any territorial claim. But some of the edge left his voice as he looked down at her. Though if you want to face him, I'll stand with you. Your choice. The fact that he was giving her a choice, treating her like an equal rather than a possession to be fought over, did more to soothe her nerves than any amount of aggressive posturing could have. I'll face him, she decided. But I'm not going to be talked about like I'm not in the room. If people have questions about me, they can ask me directly. Kale's expression shifted into something that might have been pride. My fierce little human. He brushed his lips across her forehead, the gesture tender despite the surrounding tension. Stay close to me. Don't leave my side, no matter what's said. Understood? The command should have chafed, but Alara recognized it for what it was, fear wrapped in authority. He was terrified of losing her again. Even in a room full of wolves, he could likely destroy with his bare hands. Understood, she agreed softly. Marcus led them through corridors Alara knew intimately from months of carrying trays and cleaning floors. But walking through them now, with Kale's hand possessively at the small of her back, felt entirely different. Wolves pressed themselves against walls as they passed, heads bowed in submission to their Alpha King. Some stared at Alara with open curiosity, others with barely concealed hostility. She lifted her chin higher and kept walking. The main hall was packed. It seemed every wolf in the compound had found a reason to be present, lining the walls and filling the space with barely suppressed energy. At the far end, seated in a heavy wooden chair that might as well have been a throne, sat Alpha Donovan. He was older than Kyle, perhaps mid-50s, with silver threading through his dark hair and scars marking every visible inch of skin. His eyes were a pale, cold blue, and they tracked Alara with the focus of a predator assessing prey. Mira stood at his right hand, her expression smug. Garrett flanked his left, looking uncomfortable. Alpha King, Donovan said, rising. His tone was respectful but held an edge. This is an unexpected honor. If I'd known you were coming, I would have prepared a proper welcome. I don't require pomp, Donovan, just answers. Kale didn't move toward the offered seat. Instead, he positioned himself slightly in front of Alara, protective without being obvious. I understand one of your pack members has been mistreating my mate. Gasps echoed through the hall. Even Donovan's composure cracked slightly, his eyes widening. Your mate? He looked at Alara with new assessment, and she fought the urge to hide behind Kyle. The human? Her name is Alara. Kale's voice could have cut glass. And yes, she's my mate, carrying my children, which means any insult to her is an insult to me, and any harm done to her is an act of war against Northmore. Are we clear? The temperature in the room plummeted. Several wolves shifted uneasily, and Alara saw Mira's face drain of color. Donovan was silent for a long moment, his gaze moving between Kale and Alara. Finally, he spoke. You're claiming a human as your mate, before the packs, before the old laws. It wasn't quite a question. I am. That's impossible, Mira burst out, unable to contain herself. Humans can't be mates. They don't have wolf blood. They can't form the bond. And yet the bond exists. Kale's hand moved to Alara's stomach, the gesture deliberate. Sealed in the most permanent way possible. She carries my heirs, twin children of royal blood. The prophecy made flesh. The hall erupted in whispers. Alara caught fragments. The prophecy, chaos and balance, half-human abominations, and fought to keep her expression neutral. Donovan held up a hand for silence. When the room quieted, he looked directly at Alara for the first time. Did you know what he was? When you lay with him? The crude phrasing made heat flutter cheeks, but she refused to be cowed. No. I knew him as Kale. A man who treated me with kindness when no one else did. Convenient, Mira sneered. Trap an alpha king with a pregnancy and... Careful. The word from Kale was soft but lethal. Finish that sentence, and I'll finish you. The threat hung heavy in the air. Mira's mouth snapped shut, but her eyes burned with hatred directed straight at Alara. Donovan studied them both, then sighed heavily. This is complicated, Kale. You know as well as I do that the Council will have opinions about a human mate, about half-blood heirs to the Northern Territories. The Council can have all the opinions they want. Kale's tone brooked no argument. It changes nothing. Alara is mine. Our children are legitimate, and anyone who threatens them will learn exactly why I've held the crown for the last decade. Chapter 7. Blood Speaks Louder. Donovan's expression was unreadable as he descended from his seat, moving with the fluid grace of a predator who'd survived decades of pack politics. He stopped a few feet from them, his pale eyes studying Alara with uncomfortable intensity. May I? He asked, gesturing toward her stomach. Kale's growl was immediate and visceral. No. I'm not going to hurt her. Donovan's voice was patient, like he was reasoning with a cornered animal. But if you're claiming the prophecy, Kale, then we need proof. The old magic leaves signs, marks that can't be faked or hidden. What kind of marks? Alara asked before Kale could refuse again. She felt his tension, the way every muscle in his body had coiled for violence, but she also understood pack politics well enough by now to know that Donovan was offering them a way forward. The older alpha's gaze shifted to her, and something that might have been approval flickered in his eyes. Prophecy children carry their destiny in their blood. If I place my hand on your belly and invoke the old words, their nature will reveal itself, if they're truly who Kale claims they are. And if they're not? She asked, though her heart already knew the answer. Then you're simply a human woman who got pregnant. No prophecy, no political complications. You'd be free to leave with Kale, and no one would dare question it. Donovan's expression grew grave. But if they are prophecy children, Alara, your life just became exponentially more dangerous. Every pack with political ambition will see them, and you, as either a threat or an opportunity. She's under my protection, Kale repeated, but his voice had lost some of its edge. He looked down at Alara, conflict clear in his silver eyes. You don't have to do this. We can leave right now and damn the consequences. Alara placed her hand over his where it still rested on her stomach. Will the questions follow us? The doubts about their legitimacy? His jaw tightened. Probably. Then let's end the questions now. She turned to Donovan, lifting her chin despite the fear coursing through her veins. What do I need to do? Pride and something darker, worry, maybe even fear, warred across Kale's face. But he didn't stop her. Instead, his arm wrapped more securely around her waist, anchoring her against his side. Just stand still, Donovan said quietly. He approached slowly, telegraphing his movements, and Alara appreciated the courtesy even as her heart raced. When his hand settled on her belly, large, calloused, warm, she fought the instinct to flinch away. Cale's growl was a constant rumble beside her, a warning to everyone present. Donovan closed his eyes and began speaking in a language Alara didn't recognize. Old, guttural sounds that seemed to echo with power. The air in the hall grew thick, charged with something she could feel against her skin like static electricity. Then pain. It started as a flutter, like the baby's kicking, but quickly intensified into something sharp and burning. Alara gasped, her hand flying to cover Donovan's, whether to push him away or hold him there, she wasn't sure. "Cale," she managed, and then his arms were around her, supporting her weight as her knees buckled. "What's happening?" Cale demanded, but his voice sounded distant, muffled. The burning spread from her belly outward, racing through her bloodstream like liquid fire. She could feel it in her chest, her throat, behind her eyes. And beneath it all, she felt them, her babies, responding to whatever magic Donovan had invoked. They were moving. Not the gentle flutters she'd grown accustomed to, but something purposeful, powerful. As if they recognized the call in those ancient words and were answering. Light bloomed beneath Donovan's palm, silver and gold intertwined, bright enough that Alara could see it through her closed eyelids. The entire hall held its breath. Then Donovan stumbled backward, his hand jerking away like he'd been burned. His eyes were wide with shock, maybe even fear, as he stared at Alara's stomach where symbols now glowed faintly through her dress. Intricate patterns that looked like they'd been written in starlight. "Merciful gods," he breathed. "It's true." The light faded slowly, taking the pain with it. Alara sagged against Kyle, who held her with shaking arms. She could feel his heart hammering against her back, could hear the rapid pants of his breath near her ear. "What did you see?" Kyle demanded, and there was an edge of desperation in his voice. Donovan looked at him, then at Alara, then back to Cale. Balance and chaos, light and shadow. Two souls perfectly opposed, destined to either unite the packs or tear them apart. He ran a hand through his silver-streaked hair, looking suddenly older. "The prophecy is real, Cale. Those children are going to change everything." Murmurs erupted throughout the hall, some excited, some fearful. Alara caught fragments. The old magic. Half-human prophecy, children. War is coming. "Everyone out," Kyle commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Now." The hall emptied quickly, wolves practically tripping over each other to obey their alpha king. Only Donovan, Marcus, and a few trusted advisors remained, hovering uncertainly near the doors. "You too," Cale said, though his tone was gentler. "Give us a moment." Donovan hesitated, then nodded. "We'll need to talk. About security, about what happens next. Later." Cale's arms tightened around Alara. "Right now, I need to make sure she's all right." Once they were alone, Cale turned Alara in his arms, his hands coming up to frame her face. His eyes were wild, searching hers with barely concealed panic. "Are you hurt? Did that magic?" "I'm okay," she managed, though her voice shook. "It burned, but it's gone now. The babies are..." She placed her hand on her stomach, feeling for them. Relief flooded through her when she felt their movements. Normal now, reassuring. "They're okay." Kyle's forehead dropped to rest against hers, his breath coming in harsh pants. "I should have stopped it. Should have gotten you out of here before..." "Cale." She gripped his wrists, holding his hands to her face. "We needed to know, and now we do. Now we know you're in more danger than I ever imagined." His voice broke on the words. "Prophecy children, Alara. Do you understand what that means? Every ambitious alpha in 5 territories will be coming for them. For you. Then it's a good thing they have the most powerful alpha in the region as their father. She managed a shaky smile. And a mother who's survived worse than wolf politics. He pulled back enough to look at her fully, and the raw emotion in his eyes made her breath catch. You're extraordinary. Do you know that? Any other person would be running for the hills right now. I tried running once, spent 6 months terrified and alone. She reached up to cup his face, feeling the rough stubble beneath her palm. I'm tired of running, Kyle. If this is my life now, prophecy children and pack politics and dangerous magic, then I'd rather face it with you than face anything else alone. Chapter 8. The Journey. North Kale's kiss was desperate and claiming, his mouth covering hers with a hunger that spoke of 6 months of denial and fear. Alara melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with equal fervor. It felt like coming home and falling off a cliff at the same time. Terrifying and inevitable and absolutely right. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kale rested his forehead against hers. We leave in an hour, he said roughly. I'm not risking another night with you in this territory. Not now that everyone knows what you carry. What about my things? Even as she said it, Alara realized how little she actually had worth taking. A few changes of clothes, a photograph of her parents she kept hidden beneath her pillow. Everything that truly mattered was either inside her or standing in front of her. Marcus will collect whatever you need. Right now, I need you somewhere I can defend you properly. His thumb traced her lower lip, and she saw the conflict in his eyes. The Alpha King who needed to make strategic decisions warring with the man who just wanted to hold her and never let go. I need to at least say goodbye to... She stopped, realizing there was no one. 3 months at Shadowpine, and she'd made no real friends. The other servants kept their distance from the human woman, and the wolves had barely tolerated her existence. She'd been utterly alone. Kale seemed to read her thoughts in her expression. His jaw tightened, and fresh anger flickered in his silver eyes. They left you isolated, vulnerable. They left me alive, she countered softly. Given what we just learned about the babies, maybe that's more than I should have expected. Don't. His hands gripped her shoulders, urgent. Don't make excuses for people who should have protected you. Donovan knew you came under my beta's recommendation. He should have ensured your safety, not allowed his pack to treat you like garbage. He didn't know I was pregnant, didn't know about the prophecy. He knew you were human and alone. That should have been enough. Kyle's expression hardened. I'll be having words with Donovan before we leave. This doesn't end here. Before Alara could respond, Marcus appeared in the doorway, a small bag in his hands. Your belongings, he said, approaching carefully. His amber eyes studied Alara with open curiosity now, no longer hiding behind neutral politeness. I took the liberty of adding some supplies for the journey. Food, water, a blanket. Thank you, Alara said, surprised by the consideration. Marcus's expression softened slightly. I owed you a debt. When I placed you here, I thought I was helping. Finding you somewhere safe until... He glanced at Kale, clearly uncomfortable continuing. Until I came to my senses. Kale finished grimly. You did help, Marcus. But Shadowpine was never going to be a permanent solution. No, my king. Marcus bowed his head. I should have pushed harder for you to... You did what you thought was right with the information you had. I don't fault you for that. Kale's hand found Alara's back again, that protective touch becoming familiar. But from now on, any decisions regarding Alara go through me directly. Understood? Perfectly, my king. The dismissal was clear, but before Marcus could leave, Alara stepped forward. Wait. She wasn't sure what compelled her, but something in the beta's face, guilt, maybe, or genuine concern, made her want to offer reassurance. You helped me when you didn't have to. I won't forget that. Marcus's eyes widened slightly, then a small smile crossed his features. You're going to be good for him, he said quietly, with a pointed look at Kyle. He needs someone who sees him as more than just the crown he wears. Then he was gone, leaving Alara alone with Kyle once more. He's not wrong, Alara said, turning to face the Alpha King. Is that all you are to most people? A title and power? Kale's expression was rueful. It's all I've allowed myself to be for a very long time. Easier that way. Less messy. Well, you're about to become a father to prophecy twins. I think messy is inevitable. His laugh was startled, genuine, and it transformed his entire face. For just a moment he looked younger, less like the hardened Alpha King, and more like the man who'd held her in the gardens and whispered promises against her skin. Come on, he said, taking her hand. Let's get you somewhere safe before I lose what's left of my mind. The journey north took them through territory Alara had never seen. Dense forests that seemed to go on forever, their ancient trees pressing close to the narrow road. Kale drove with focused intensity, one hand on the wheel, the other never straying far from where she sat beside him. They'd left Shadowpine with an escort, 3 vehicles full of Kale's personal guard, wolves who'd made the trip south with him. Now they formed a protective convoy, 1 vehicle ahead and 2 behind, bracketing them against potential threats. Is all this really necessary? Alara asked, watching the trees blur past her window. Yes. Kyle's voice was flat, leaving no room for argument. Word of the prophecy will spread fast. By tomorrow, every pack in the territory will know about you and the children. Some will see you as a blessing. Others... He didn't finish the sentence, but his knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Alara placed her hand over his, feeling the tension humming through him. Tell me about Northmoor. Your home. He glanced at her, clearly, recognizing the deliberate subject change, but played along. It's nothing like Shadowpine. The main compound sits in a valley surrounded by mountains, defensible, remote. We have about 300 wolves in the immediate pack, with allied packs in the surrounding territories that bring the total to over 1,000. That's a lot of wolves. It's a lot of responsibility. His thumb stroked over her knuckles absently. But they're loyal, strong, and they'll protect you because you're mine, even before they understand what the prophecy means. What if they don't accept me? A human as their alpha's mate? Kale's smile was sharp, predatory. They'll accept you, or they'll answer to me. I'm not particularly interested in their opinions on the matter. That's very romantic, she said dryly. I warned you I wasn't a romantic man. But his expression softened as he looked at her. Though I'm willing to work on it. What do you need, Alara? Flowers? Poetry? Grand gestures? Honesty, she said immediately. Trust. And maybe... She hesitated, then pushed forward. Maybe you could tell me about your family. The sister you mentioned. Help me understand the man behind the Alpha King. His hand tensed under hers, and for a moment she thought he'd refuse. Then he took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Her name was Lissa, he said quietly. She was 2 years younger than me, and she was the best of all of us. Kind where my father was cruel, gentle where I was violent. She could make anyone smile, even in the darkest times. Retry Z continue the slow emotional buildup, deepen the bond between characters, and maintain suspense about the shifter's identity or secret. Keep the word count consistent, and naturally lead into the next section. Write 1,000 words. Chapter 9. Ghosts and Promises. Alara heard the pain beneath Kale's words, centuries of grief compressed into a few simple sentences. She squeezed his hand, offering silent support, and after a moment he continued. She was 16 when it happened. Too young to be involved in pack politics, but our enemies didn't care about that. His voice had gone distant, hollow. They took her during a peace summit, walked right into neutral territory, and dragged her out of her room in the middle of the night. By the time we found her, 3 days later, he didn't finish, didn't need to. "I'm so sorry," Alara whispered, inadequate words for an inadequate world. I was 20, barely holding the territory together after our parents died in the previous war. I thought if I could just negotiate peace, end the bloodshed, she'd be safe. His laugh was bitter. I was naive. I didn't understand yet that in our world, peace is just the breath between battles. That showing mercy is seen as weakness, and weakness invites attack. That's not true. He glanced at her, eyebrows raised. Mercy isn't weakness, Alara insisted. You came back for me. You could have left me at Shadowpine, could have denied the children were yours and avoided this entire political nightmare. But you didn't. That's not weakness, Kale. That's courage. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or the beginning of belief. You see me differently than most people do. I see you as you are, not as what you think you need to be. She shifted in her seat, turning to face him more fully despite the seatbelt's constraint. Tell me something. That night in the gardens, when you found me at the Convergence, did you know then? About the mate bond? Kale was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working. The moment I saw you across that hall, yes. Every instinct I had was screaming at me that you were mine, that I'd found something I'd thought was a myth. His eyes found hers briefly before returning to the road. That's why I stayed away at first. Watched you from a distance. Tried to convince myself I was imagining it. A human mate seemed impossible. But you came to find me anyway. I couldn't help myself. You were standing by the fountain, looking at the stars like they held all the answers to questions you were afraid to ask. And I thought... He swallowed hard. I thought maybe, just once, I could have something for myself. Something that wasn't about duty or power or politics. Alara's throat tightened. Those 3 nights were the most honest I've been in a decade, he finished quietly. I didn't lie to you, Alara. I just didn't tell you everything. And by the time I realized I should have, I'd convinced myself you were better off not knowing. Better off without me. That wasn't your decision to make. I know that now. His hand turned beneath hers, fingers interlacing. When Marcus told me you were pregnant, the first thing I felt was joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. The second thing was terror, because I knew what it meant. That I dragged you into a world that destroys the things I love. I'm not that easy to destroy, Alara said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. I survived losing my parents, survived 6 months alone in a hostile pack. I'm still here, still standing. Give me some credit. Kale's smile was real this time, warm and genuine. You're right. You're stronger than I gave you credit for. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. I won't make that mistake again. The convoy slowed as they approached a checkpoint, a massive gate set between 2 cliffs, manned by wolves in tactical gear. When they saw Kale's vehicle, the gate swung open immediately, and Alara caught sight of symbols carved into the stone above. A wolf's head wreathed in silver flames. Welcome to Northmoor, Kale said softly. The valley beyond took Alara's breath away. Even in the gathering darkness, she could see the compound sprawling below. Not a collection of ramshackle buildings like Shadowpine, but a proper fortress that somehow managed to look both ancient and maintained. Stone buildings with slate roofs, lit windows glowing, warm against the twilight. Gardens and training yards and what looked like a central plaza, all organized around a massive structure at the valley's heart. That's the keep, Kyle explained, following her gaze. My home. Soon to be yours, if you'll have it. Alara's hand moved instinctively to her belly. Our children's home. Yes. The single word carried the weight of a vow. As they descended into the valley, Alara noticed wolves emerging from buildings, lining the road. Not threatening, watching, curious. Word had clearly traveled fast, even in the few hours since they'd left Shadowpine. They know, Kale said, reading her thoughts. Marcus sent word ahead. The entire pack will know about you, about the prophecy, by now. And they're okay with it? A human carrying their Alpha King's children? They'll adjust. His tone suggested there was no other acceptable option. Besides, you're not just any human. You're my mate. That makes you their Luna. Their queen. They'll respect you, or they'll answer to me. The convoy pulled to a stop in front of the keep's main entrance. Before Alara could reach for the door handle, Kale was there, opening it for her and offering his hand. She took it, letting him help her out, acutely aware of dozens of eyes watching their every move. A woman approached, tall, elegant, with black hair streaked with silver and eyes the color of amber. She wore authority like a second skin, and when she bowed her head to Kale, there was genuine respect in the gesture. My king, she said, her voice rich and cultured. Welcome home. We've prepared the Luna's suite as requested. Thank you, Vera. Kyle's arm moved to Alara's waist, protective and possessive. Alara, this is Vera, my head of household and the closest thing I have to family left. Vera, this is Alara, my mate. Vera's eyes widened fractionally as they moved to Alara, and for a moment Alara braced for judgment, for rejection. Instead, the older woman's face softened into something that might have been relief. Finally, Vera said quietly, and there was genuine warmth in her smile. I was beginning to think you'd never find her, Kale. Neither was I, Kale admitted, and the vulnerability in his voice made Alara's chest ache. Vera turned her attention fully to Alara, and those amber eyes seemed to see straight through her. You're exhausted, hungry, I'd wager, and probably terrified, though you're doing an admirable job hiding it. Alara's surprise must have shown on her face, because Vera's smile widened. I've been managing this household for 30 years, child. I know when someone needs care. She extended her hand. Come, let me show you to your rooms. Kale has pack business to attend to, but you need rest. I'm not leaving her, Kale said immediately. Chapter 10. The Luna's Crown. Vera's expression was patient but firm. My king, your advisors have been waiting for hours. The council needs to know about the prophecy, about your plans for security. And, Alara, she looked at the human woman with something close to sympathy. She needs food, a bath, and sleep, in that order. Not a room full of territorial wolves debating her fate while she's present. Kale's jaw clenched, and Alara could feel the conflict radiating from him. Duty warring with the primal need to keep her close, to protect what was his. She's right, Alara said softly, placing her hand on his chest. Beneath her palm, his heart raced. I'm exhausted, and I don't think I'm ready to face a council of alphas tonight. But tomorrow I'll stand beside you and face whatever comes. His hand covered hers, pressing it more firmly against his heart. I don't like being away from you. Not when threats could come from anywhere. Then post guards, station wolves outside my door. Whatever you need to do to feel like I'm safe. She rose on her toes, bringing her face closer to his. But I need you to trust that I'll still be here in the morning. That I'm not going to disappear the moment you turn your back. Something flickered in his silver eyes. Old fear. Old wounds that went bone deep. Everyone I've loved has disappeared. You can't blame me for— I'm not disappearing, she interrupted firmly. I'm going to take a bath, eat whatever delicious food I'm sure Vera has prepared, and sleep in what I'm guessing is the most comfortable bed I've ever seen. Then tomorrow, we face the council together, as mates, as partners. The emphasis on the last word seemed to reach him. Kale exhaled slowly, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. Together? He repeated, like he was testing the word. I'm not used to that. Get used to it. Alara managed a tired smile. You're about to be a father of twins. Nothing about your life is going to be usual anymore. That earned her a genuine laugh, rough and surprised. Kyle pulled her close, burying his face in her hair and just breathing her in for a long moment. 3 hours, he said against her temple. I'll deal with the council, make sure security is tripled, and then I'm coming to your rooms, whether you're ready for me or not. I'll leave the door unlocked, she whispered back. His arms tightened briefly, then he released her with obvious reluctance. Vera, I'm trusting you with the most important thing in my world. Keep her safe. With my life, my king. Vera's tone carried absolute conviction. She'll be protected as if she were my own daughter. Kale nodded once, then forced himself to turn away. Alara watched him stride toward a side entrance where several large, dangerous-looking wolves waited. Before he disappeared inside, he looked back at her one more time, his expression holding 1,000 unspoken promises. Then he was gone, and Alara felt the loss like a physical ache. Come, child. Vera's voice was gentle as she took Alara's elbow. Let's get you settled before you fall over. You're swaying on your feet. Now that Kale's presence wasn't holding her upright through sheer force of will, Alara realized Vera was right. Her legs felt like water, her head spinning with exhaustion. How long had it been since she'd slept properly? Days, at least. Fear didn't make for restful nights. Vera guided her through corridors that were nothing like Shadowpine's rough functionality. These halls were beautiful. Stone walls hung with tapestries depicting wolf hunts and battles, floors of polished wood that gleamed in the lamplight. They passed wolves who bowed their heads respectfully, their eyes tracking Alara with curiosity, but not the hostility she'd grown accustomed to. They're staring, Alara murmured. Of course they are. You're the first Luna Northmore has had in over a decade, and you're carrying prophecy children. Vera's tone was matter-of-fact. You'll be stared at quite a bit, I'm afraid. But they're good wolves, Alara. Loyal to Kale, which means they'll be loyal to you. Even though I'm human? Vera was quiet for a moment as they climbed a broad staircase. Kale's mother was human, she said finally. Alara stopped mid-step. What? His mother. Elena. She was human when she met Kale's father. A village healer who treated a wounded wolf and ended up mated to the Alpha King. Vera continued climbing, pulling Alara gently along. The bond changed her eventually. Human mates of powerful wolves sometimes develop abilities. Enhanced strength, longer lifespans, sometimes even the ability to sense pack bonds. She lived to see Kale take the crown before the war claimed her. Kale never mentioned. He doesn't talk about her much. The loss is still too raw, even after all these years. Vera stopped before a set of ornate double doors. But he loved her fiercely, and she was a remarkable Luna. The pack adored her, human origins and all. That gives me hope for you. She pushed open the doors, revealing a suite that made Alara's breath catch. It was beautiful. A sitting room with plush furniture arranged around a fireplace, doors leading to what looked like a bedroom and bathroom beyond. The walls were painted in soft creams and golds, and fresh flowers filled vases on every surface. This is... Alara couldn't find words. Yours, Vera finished firmly. The Luna's suite, vacant for too long. Kale's rooms are through that connecting door. She pointed to an ornate door on the far wall. Though I suspect you'll be sharing them soon enough. For tonight, you have privacy if you want it. Alara moved into the space, her fingers trailing over soft fabrics and smooth wood. Everything smelled clean and fresh, like someone had been preparing it for days. You knew, she realized. You knew he was bringing me here. Marcus sent word 2 days ago that Kale was headed to Shadowpine. The way he moved, dropping everything, driving through the night. I knew it had to be her. The one who'd been haunting him for months. Vera's smile was knowing. He tried to hide it, but I've known that boy since he was in diapers. I could see the hole you'd left in him. I didn't leave. He did. And he's been miserable ever since. Vera moved to the bedroom door, pushing it open. Come. Your bath is ready, and I'll have food brought up while you're soaking. The bathroom was as impressive as the rest, a deep tub already filled with steaming water, herbs floating on the surface filling the air with a calming lavender scent. Soft towels were stacked nearby, and a simple nightgown lay draped over a chair.